to please take over.
Yeah. Good evening to all. I request everyone to kindly settle down and please keep yourselves muted all the time. Innovate Club of Bangalore Orchards present Prasavitri, Celebrating the Gift of Life, a digital seminar on the art and science of breastfeeding. We have 5 eminent doctors with us as speakers who will be sharing their knowledge and educate us on the importance and the science of breastfeeding. Do stay till the end as we have an interactive session where you can clear all your doubts. I would request you all to put your queries on the chat box so that it can be taken up and answered later. I now request President Rathna Supriya Sridharan to welcome the gathering. Over to you, Rathna. Can you please unmute yourself? Jayesh, can you please unmute Rathna? Jayesh, can you hear me?
Sorry, once again. Namaste to one and all. I think I got logged out accidentally, or I do not know. I hope the net favors us today. We from Innovate Club of Bangalore Orchards, who is part of a worldwide women's service organization to create friendship, volunteer service and understanding. We are spread over 104 countries and have over 1 lakh of members. India accounts to almost half the strength with over 45,000 members. We belong to the district 319 and we are one of the 39 clubs of this district. I am the 32nd president of Innovate Club of Bangalore Orchards, and in our club we have 68 members. We are proud that we have past association president who is a national representative and 4 past district chairmen. This organization, the motto is friendship and service, and we do have friendship meets and we have service projects. Prasavitri, Celebrating the Gift of Life, is our first global seminar which we are presenting today. Matrum samam nasti sharira poshanam. None equals the mother's care towards the nourishment and growth of her child. The theme of World Breastfeeding Week 2020 is Support Breastfeeding for a Healthy Planet. Though breastfeeding is a natural process, the mother definitely needs support. And today, we have eminent doctors to guide through this in this regard. On behalf of the Innovate Club of Bangalore Orchards and the executive members, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Latha Venkatraman, Dr. Sheela Swamy, Dr. Supriya Chandrasekhar, Dr. Hallin, and Ms. Rebecca. let us have a very intensive listening to the art and science of breastfeeding and the feed for a child. Over to you, Mrs. Suma Ravi.
Yeah. I'm glad to introduce Dr. Sheela Swamy. Designation: she is a consultant ONG and urogynecology at Guy's and St. Thomas NHS Foundation Trust. She is a senior research associate, Division of Medicine at University College, London. She has many publications to her credit. To name a few: care of obesity, splenic artery aneurysm, hysterectomy and menopause, fallacies and misconceptions in the diagnosis of UTI, and many, many more. Her special interests: high-risk obstetrics, urogynecology, clinical governance and risk management, and research in obstetric and gynecology. Here I present Dr. Sheela Swamy. Over to you, Doctor.
I'm going to just share my screen first. Can you see my screen, everyone? Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Mrs. Rathna, Supriya, for the introduction, Dr. Chandrasekhar and Dr. Supriya for hosting and for inviting us to speak at this webinar. And I'm also looking forward to listening to the fantastic lineup of topics that you have today. As I said, I practice in London, and I would like to speak about why breast is best. I'm going to try and move the slide to the next one. It sometimes takes a little while. Okay, so why is breastfeeding important? The Convention on the Rights of a Child says every infant and child has the right to good nutrition. Breastfeeding is one of the most effective ways to ensure child health. If breastfeeding is scaled up, if all children 0 to 23 months of age were optimally breastfed, over 820,000 children's lives could be saved every year. These are the under 5-year-olds. Globally, only 40% of infants 0 to 6 months of age are exclusively breastfed, and that is a shockingly low figure. Undernutrition is associated with 45% of child deaths. Globally, in 2019, 144 million children under the age of 5 were estimated to be stunted, which is too short for their age. 47 million were estimated to be wasted, that is too thin for height. 38.3 million of these children were overweight or obese. Now, these figures in the 21st century are unacceptable. Few children receive nutritionally adequate or safe complementary foods. In many countries, less than 1/4 of infants 6 to 23 months of age meet the criteria for the dietary diversity and feeding frequency that is appropriate for this age. So the WHO breastfeeding recommendations suggest that the mother should start breastfeeding within 1 hour of birth. Infants should be exclusively breastfed for about 6 months to achieve optimal growth. Breastfeeding should also continue for up to 2 years and beyond, and Dr. Supriya will be talking about the top-up and the weaning. Ideal food for the newborn with all nutrients is available in breast milk, and this will ensure healthy development. It is safe and it contains antibodies that prevent childhood illnesses like diarrhea and pneumonia, which are 2 major primary causes for childhood mortality worldwide. Breast milk is readily available and affordable. It ends hunger. It ensures free infant nutrition and prevents malnutrition. Breastfeeding is beneficial to the mothers. Exclusive breastfeeding mothers get a natural method for birth control for up to 6 months. It reduces the risk of breast and ovarian cancer, type 2 diabetes, and postpartum depression. Breastfeeding has some long-term benefits for children as well. Adolescents and adults who breastfeed are less likely to be overweight or obese. They're less likely to have type 2 diabetes, eczema, allergies, and childhood asthma. Breastfeeding improves the IQ, school attendance, and is associated with high income in adult life. Improving child development reduces the health costs through breastfeeding, results in economic gains not only for the individual family, but for the nation as a whole. So is HIV in a mother a contraindication to breastfeeding? No. Together with breastfeeding and antiretrovirals, which are drugs used to treat HIV and reduce the viral load in a mother and given to an infant after birth, they have a potential to significantly increase the chances of the infant surviving while remaining HIV uninfected. We've all heard of several breast milk substitutes. There is an international code which was introduced in 1981 to prevent marketing of breast milk substitutes. No promotions or adverts of supplements is allowed. All companies should promote breastfeeding on their labels. No free samples should be given out to mothers or to family members, and the distribution of free or subsidized products to health workers and to hospitals is not allowed. Now, infant formula, when it is inappropriately prepared with unsafe water, unsterilized equipment, bacteria in formula, this can do more harm than good. It is not at all eco-friendly. The amount of plastic, tins, electricity, sterilizing equipment, all of these does not come cheap, and it can lead to devastating effects on the ecosystem. As you can see on my slide, UNO has suggested that there's at least 46,000 pieces of plastic floating in every square mile of the ocean, with 70% of it sitting at the ocean floor. And you know what this does to the ecosystem. Enormous costs of formula results in low-income groups diluting the feeds. This results in infant malnutrition with its devastating consequences on child health and future development. You only need to see a few cases to measure the impact, and the global figures that I quoted on my third slide are shocking, and we can't accept this in the 21st century. So let's go back to breastfeeding, because that is the best. Now, no talk is complete without talking about coronavirus, and it looks like there is going to be an ongoing second wave. COVID-19 is not a contraindication to breastfeeding. Women who are suspected or are confirmed to have COVID-19, we still recommend breastfeeding where safe and feasible. The mother should remain together with her baby and practice skin-to-skin or kangaroo care. When a mother is not well enough, we should encourage her to express breast milk by hand or pump, or use donor milk from a breast bank if it's available in your area. A risk-benefit discussion should be had with a neonatologist, and it is recommended for those individual babies who may be more susceptible to COVID-19, especially the ones who are very, very premature. The Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health in the UK has suggested these 8 precautions to limit the spread of COVID-19 to the baby. If the mother is unwell and she is currently positive, consider asking someone who's well in the family to feed the baby, and she can express and pass the milk to the well family member. Wash hands before touching the baby, breast pump, or bottles. You should be doing this even if you're COVID negative. Avoiding coughing or sneezing on the baby is also helpful. Consider wearing some sort of face covering or a fluid-resistant face mask while you're caring for your baby or feeding. Babies should not wear face masks or other face coverings because of the risk of suffocation, and this is quite clear in most guidelines. When women are expressing breast milk in hospital, a dedicated breast pump should be given to each individual. Where the breast pump is used, they have to follow recommendations for pump cleaning after every single use. For babies who are bottle fed with formula or express milk, strict adherence to sterilization guidelines is recommended. Now, I'm very pleased to see that women across the world are very career driven. For some, it is a choice, and for some, it is an absolute necessity. Return to work does not mean that you should give up breastfeeding. Protected maternity leave and part-time working is really encouraged in the United Kingdom. My colleague Aggie will discuss her experience having just had a baby and what facilities we have in the UK for supporting women to go back to work. The environment for breastfeeding is very, very important. We need to have lactation rooms to feed, to express, or to store breast milk. On-site creches will help as well for the woman to pop out and feed her baby. Breastfeeding breaks are mandatory in most workplaces. So it is important to support these women when they get back to work and not just assume that they're not going to breastfeed. The WHO UNICEF Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative sets the standards for quality care. So I must say breastfeeding is a learned skill, which my colleague Rebecca is going to talk to you about. Women encounter difficulties at the beginning and we should support them. Routine practices must end, like compulsory separation of the mother and baby to allow rest for the mother. Newborn nurseries are really not necessary. Supplementation with formula milk, assuming that breast milk is not enough, is not a good enough answer. Trained breastfeeding counselors and support workers to new mothers is absolutely invaluable, and we should be training people to take on this service. We have a very good support system in the UK, and Rebecca will again talk to you about this. Now, there are some references that I've left at the end, and I'm happy to take questions at the moment, or we can all discuss at the end. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Sheela.
You're welcome.
Yeah. We have with us today our district chairman, Suma Prafulla, Association Council member Lalana Murthy, and all the district executive committee members. And we have other club presidents as well with us. So welcome you all to this seminar. I welcome all the other members as well who have logged in. I would now like to introduce Dr. Glazewska Hallin. Qualifications: MRCOG, PG in CERT, Medical Education, MB CHB. Designation: she is a craft study coordinator, research fellow in preterm birth team, MD in Women's Health from King's College London, ONG trainee in South London. Her special interest: preterm birth, medical education. She's also a mom to Leander, who is 5 months old. Here I present Dr. Hallin. Over to you, Doctor.
Thanks very much. Sorry about that. Just had to load my slides. I hope that you can see it all okay. Can everybody see?
Yes, we are able to see it.
Yeah, super. So I'm Aggie, as I said. I'm one of the doctors in London. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is little Leander, who's maybe going to be helping. And I just want to talk about my experience of breastfeeding as a working mum and how I've tried to make it work for me, for both of us. The reality that I was met with when I first started breastfeeding is very much all about what you eat, eating healthily, being aware sort of baby's early cues for feeding, and learning how to pump, as well as all of those things that make life more bearable, such as extra coffee in the mornings and afternoons and basically any time of day. So that was very much a reality that I wasn't completely prepared for. I didn't do a lot of reading beforehand, so I just want to share with you what I found useful. So just going back a little bit and talking about, well, what our journey was about. We had an emergency cesarean delivery at 38 weeks. We did initiate breastfeeding within the first hour. Despite that and the milk coming in, Leander had a significant weight loss of 14% in the week following birth. And so initially we did breastfeed with topping up, and then weaning off the top-ups whilst the supply increased. So that did involve a lot of pumping and also hand expressing initially before starting to pump. And later on in the weeks to follow, it did also require a course of domperidone to boost my supply. But that is very specific to me because I have an autoimmune condition, which may be why I had a little bit of a supply issue, but it isn't usually that difficult. In terms of the galactagogues, so those are things that anyone can choose to take as a nutritional supplement or just as part of normal nutrition throughout the day. So things like oats, different kinds of herbs, herbal teas can be useful to help boost supply. There's not a lot of fantastic trials or studies looking at their effectiveness, but I do think that they made a difference. And if anything, they boosted the nutrition that I was taking in, and it was just part of a normal, healthy, balanced diet anyway. So at the moment, we are exactly 5 months old today, and we are 90% breastfeeding with the occasional top up, not necessarily every day, depending on things. And we've now completely weaned off the domperidone. So that's our specific story. And moving on to what I have learned, breastfeeding was definitely not easy. It was something that we both had to learn, and that took time, and it was definitely an acquired skill, but well worth it. And it definitely struck me, especially going past the 6-week mark post-birth, that it was more than just a form of nourishment. It also allowed him to receive antibodies through my milk, so some form of immunity, and especially as Dr. Sheela Swamy mentioned, during these COVID times, women should be even more strongly encouraged to breastfeed. It also provided him with warmth and comfort. Not all breastfeeding is purely for nutritional intake for the baby. It's actually also part of mum and baby bonding, and helps keep him calm and de-stresses him if he's feeling upset. And it is an opportunity to be more mindful and practice mindfulness during a breastfeed, as opposed to being distracted by other things and just taking time out and concentrating on the bond between you and your baby. The other thing that breastfeeding has been helpful for is weight loss following birth. Not that that should be a priority or the reason that you breastfeed, but it's just an associated plus. And it also can help with getting baby to sleep. So not everybody chooses to breastfeed their baby to sleep, but I particularly found it really helpful and just a really efficient way of getting him down, either at nighttime or for some naps. Not always, but it's just an extra option. The other important thing that I learned that I didn't realize, despite working as an obstetrician and despite thinking that I know a little bit about the physiology of breastfeeding, is that a breastfeed, or the amount of milk that you're producing and giving to your baby, is not necessarily directly equivalent to how much milliliters of formula that baby would normally receive per that certain feed. And I think that's a really important thing to note with breastfeeding, that it's not that breastfeeding is a 7 times a day process. Babies snack just like we snack. They have big meals, they have starters, main and dessert, or they might just fancy a little dessert. And so breastfeeding is more about responding to your baby's cues, early cues of hunger or peckishness, and sort of going with it. And when the baby is satisfied, knowing that is when they're naturally happy to stop the feed. The other more sort of practical things about preparing or thinking about breastfeeding for the mum is to eat very little not very little, but eating little and often. So not necessarily relying on big meals or thinking or planning massive meals throughout the day, but grazing, snacking, anything that sort of means that you're sustaining a very level kind of glucose level and just maintaining your nutritional needs as well as for the baby through breastfeeding. Always drinking a glass of fluid, particularly water, with every breastfeed, nourishing varied foods and healthy fats. Things like fish 2 to 3 times a week for the omega-3 fatty component for baby's brain development is very important, and a vitamin D supplement if you are breastfeeding exclusively or at least mostly breastfeeding, as that is something that you will need to take alongside as a nutritional supplement. The support that I had to breastfeed as a mum, but also as a working mum, there was early help from midwives in the postpartum period. There are milk spots. This is like a national thing, but particularly in London as well, there are lots of milk support groups that meet in order to get help with things such as latch or anything to do with breastfeeding at all or pumping. And also if there is a need to top up, or if there's a weight issue, to get extra support with that. And during COVID times at the moment, they've managed to continue that virtually, which has been very, very helpful. In terms of support when going back to work, there's the opportunity to work flexibly with less than full-time training, as well as being able to job share at a particular hospital. We also have maternity pay, which is 12 months with full pay during the first 8 weeks, followed by half pay, and then either statutory maternity pay for the last 13 weeks or 90% of your pay if it's below a certain threshold. There is support for trainees, as in if the need should arise that you need to pump at work, for example, then time can be set aside. You can try to work that into your schedule. Goes without saying that nurseries or creches in the workplace particularly are very open to you coming to breastfeed. There are specific rooms. Workplaces do vary, but nurseries definitely have this kind of opportunity. And so I feel that if we were to continue further with our breastfeeding journey well beyond the first year, we would have those options available to us. I've just put up some resources that I found particularly helpful for mums thinking about or starting to breastfeed or needing some support. Any questions under the sun can basically be answered by following these links. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Rebecca Balcombe. Qualifications: BA Honours, Diploma HERM. She is a registered midwife since 13 years. Designation: Midwifery Practice Leader. Sites are Hospital Birth Center, Home from Home Birthing Center, Hospital Guy's and St. Thomas NHS Foundation Trust. Special interest: examination of the newborn, breastfeeding support and postnatal care, perinatal mental health and well-being, Resuscitation Council UK, newborn life support instructor, antenatal education instructor. She is a mother of 3 children. Here I present Rebecca Balcombe. Over to you, Rebecca.
Hello, thank you for having me today. So, as you said already, I'm a midwife with lots of experience. I am a mother of the 3 naughty children you just saw on the screen there. They are 11, 8 and 4, and my breastfeeding journey has spanned 8 years actually in total. I was adding it up today and thinking about that journey. So 8 years of many challenges, and having the theory in my mind, of course, being a midwife already, but not quite knowing the practice. So as Aggie said, it comes as a little bit of a shock, even though you know the theory, when you're then faced with the reality of a little baby. So I'm going to talk, Sheela talked about the sort of theory, the benefits, and Aggie has talked about that sort of practicality and ongoing. I'm going to talk about the early days, because what's essential for successful breastfeeding, for getting it right, is the preparation involved. So what we're doing now is preparation in itself. We're talking about the subject, which is really important. It is important to read about breastfeeding during the pregnancy so that you can get to grips with what is going to come to an extent, and learn about the changes that you're going through during pregnancy. So the changes to your anatomy, the fact that you produce milk from at least halfway through the pregnancy. And that's something that I think a lot of women don't realize. There's a lot of debate about whether women have enough milk to breastfeed. And of course, actually we do, it's there. And learning about the changes to your breasts, the changes that when you start producing milk, and how to actually express. It's a really great skill to learn that during pregnancy. So during the last month, perhaps, of pregnancy, I would always encourage my patients to try to express. And that skill is a very simple skill, using your thumb and your forefinger. You don't need any equipment. We don't need any expensive gadgetry to do that. We just need to know that we use our thumb, forefinger, we find where the areola is, the darker bit, we go behind there, we have a good feel of the milk ducts in the breast. You might feel these little pea-shaped nodules in the breast. And that's where the milk is being stored. That's where the colostrum is, the early milk. And practicing doing it in a comfortable way, so we're not damaging the skin, we're realizing how delicate our breasts are, and managing to express even a tiny, tiny droplet during the pregnancy will just increase your confidence, knowing that there is something there ready for when your baby arrives. It's also really important that we learn this skill when we don't have a baby in our arms. As Aggie will tell you right now, it's quite difficult juggling a baby at the same time as doing other things, and certainly at the same time as learning new skills. So if we can do that during pregnancy, it just boosts our confidence so that we know how to do that when the baby arrives. So I would certainly encourage women to do that. If they have lots of colostrum there, they can of course store that. And the storage of breast milk is very simple, very straightforward. We need sterile containers. We can use little syringes in the early days because there isn't very much of it. And as long as we have a good freezer, we can actually freeze it for 6 months. So it's a really good way of preparing. The other things that we need to prepare for, I think like Aggie has highlighted, is that breastfeeding is not easy. Yes, it's worthwhile, and yes, breastfeeding is best. We know the theory, we know that, but nobody really prepares us for the fact that it is hard work, it's tiring, it's a challenge, it's a skill that we both have to learn. And that does come as news, because something so natural perhaps shouldn't be hard work, but of course it is. So knowing that it's going to be hard work, and knowing that at times it will be uncomfortable. Our breasts have never been used for this before. So consider that our breasts are now going to be used 10 times a day to feed a baby, sometimes for up to an hour. Of course, there is going to be some degree of discomfort there. And we're also recovering from a birth. So we're going to be uncomfortable in some way, shape or form from that as well. And there are many different types of birth we can have. We might have had an elective cesarean, we might have had a completely drug-free normal birth, and we might have had anything in between, an emergency cesarean, perhaps forceps. And those will lead to mum and baby feeling some degree of soreness, and we will be tired. So we'll physically have sort of taken a hit, almost like we've just run a marathon. Our body and our baby, will be recovering from that. So some babies, if we've had a completely drug-free normal birth, some babies will be absolutely born ready to feed and to lead their own feeding. So they will be able to tell you when they want to feed for as long as they want, and breastfeeding may well get onto a very simple start. if we've had some sort of intervention, if the baby has a little bit of bruising from forceps, if we're particularly tired, we may need to be a little bit more proactive. And that's where, again, the expressing might come into its own, and we'll know how to do that already because we'll have prepared and learned that skill beforehand. So even if our baby is tired and needs a little bit of a nudge to feed, we will know and we'll already be ready to do those things and get the ball rolling. So we almost have a bit of a traffic light system at our hospital, where we sort of consider that these babies that have had completely drug-free births, they're green, they're good to go. Babies that have had slightly more traumatic births, or perhaps babies that are born early, babies that are smaller, or if we have a risk factor, so mum has diabetes or something like that, they're closer to the red end of the spectrum, where we need to be a lot more proactive and teach these babies how to feed. And we need a lot of support to do that. So we need to take into account how mum is feeling, especially what sort of painkillers is she having? Is she comfortable enough to sit up and sustain this feed? Immediately after birth, or as soon as possible, we want to get the baby in a skin-to-skin position, because we know this is so beneficial for both baby and mum. For baby, it's going to regulate their temperature, their breathing. It's going to give them access to the breast and allow them to feed as early as possible. For mum, it's a soothing, calming, bonding experience. So it's really important for both people, for both mum and baby, that we get that as soon as possible. It also allows babies to go through a process of, we call it biological nurturing, where some babies will actually make their own way to the breast, and it's quite fascinating to watch videos of that, because healthy, well babies can actually sort of move across and they almost crawl to the breast. And it's really interesting to see the natural instincts working. You can do that as much as you want, for as long as you want, and skin to skin will always be very calming for mum and baby. Now, talking about the first latch, the first attachment, we at our hospital and in lots of other hospitals, we talk about this acronym CHINS, and we're considering at that point C for keeping the baby close to us, H, keeping the head free. So if you were eating your meal, you wouldn't want somebody pushing on the back of your head. Babies don't want that either. So giving them the movement to tell you when they've had enough or when they're uncomfortable is really important. I, keeping the baby in alignment. So you wouldn't eat with your head to one side. Babies don't either. We keep them close to our body with their head in line with their body. N, nose to nipple. So we're not aiming to get the nose into, so if I use my hand as a picture of the mouth, so this is the lower lip and this is the upper lip and this is the nipple. If the nipple goes directly into the mouth, of course, actually what you're going to hit is the hard palate or the gums, and that's going to really crush the nipple and cause damage to it. And cracked nipples take a while to heal, so we want to avoid that damage as much as possible. So what we want to do is wait for this baby to have a really beautiful wide open mouth, and we bring the baby very close very quickly, remembering that breast tissue is soft and bouncy, so we're not going to hurt the baby at all. And the nipple wants to go much further back to where the soft palate is, and that will mean that we're not doing damage to the nipple at all. So lots of the areola goes over the bottom lip is curled out just like my thumb is, and the latch will be really, really good, a very, very wide open latch with cheeks full of breast tissue, no clicking noises, and there's a good suction there. The last letter is S. We need this position to be sustainable. So like Aggie said, having a drink next to you, making sure that you don't need to go to the bathroom, making sure that you've got your phone next to you, whatever it is that you might need. You don't need to get up and change that position. It's really, really important that we look at all of those things. And if we get the latch right from the beginning, hopefully we won't do any damage to the nipples, we won't have any increase in soreness or pain, and it will make the journey a lot more easy. Now, the suck is incredibly strong. It's incredibly strong in the beginning, because if you imagine colostrum is like sucking a very thick milkshake through a very small straw, that's what a baby's having to do. So the suck is incredibly strong. It's an intense feeling. It's stronger at the beginning of the feed as your milk is starting to flow. And probably that intense feeling will last for about 10 to 20 seconds, and it should then calm down. If it doesn't, we reassess the latch and just check that it's all fine. When the milk comes in, so we're looking really around day 3 to 5, when the milk comes in, so you have the full milk, full breasts, then the milk flow will be a lot easier. You might feel a letdown reflex where you get a surge in hormones and the milk is really being pushed out of your body. The baby probably will at that point sort of be a bit shocked by the flow coming into their mouth, and they might struggle to sort of swallow it all. They'll get used to it eventually, but that's when you really know that your milk is in. So babies at that point are often much more satisfied. They come off with a sort of very sleepy look on their face, often with a dribble of milk out of their mouth, and you'll know and you'll think that they look very satisfied. We'll be weighing the babies and they'll be starting to put weight back on. We expect for them to lose up to 10% really in the first week, but they will lose that and then start to gain again as your milk comes through. And the first 4 weeks are really important as a period of calibration where your body and your baby get into a rhythm of producing the right amount of milk. That will be disturbed every now and then as the baby has a growth spurt, and it feels like you do nothing but feed for an entire 24-hour period, but the next day your body's producing more. Remembering that every time you feed, your baby is putting in an order for the next feed. So it's telling your body, I need this next time. So when we skip feeds and give top-ups, it often leads to a reduce in milk supply, a reduction in milk supply. So it can be a bit tricky when we do that. If we sort of want to get some sleep and you know, maybe give a bottle at night, it's often feels like the best thing, but it's often counterintuitive and leads to a bit of a problem further on. So we need to persevere. We need to be very aware of feeding cues. So when the baby wakes up, they're generally hungry, just always. They also tend to lick their lips or maybe put a hand to the mouth, turn the head to one side, searching for food. And the last feeding cue we get to is crying. If we get to crying, it sort of means we've missed all of the feed. So we need to be really on top of looking when baby is hungry. And it might be that other people can help you in doing that if you are getting some rest. If the baby is crying, it's really good to settle the baby down, bring the baby back from that point of real upset, and calm the baby down with a cuddle. Maybe somebody else cuddles the baby because mums often smell of milk. So somebody settling the baby and then quickly going back to that chins, getting the baby on in a really good position. I could ramble about breastfeeding till the cows come home. I can ramble for hours and hours and hours. But what is essential is that women have support. So talking like this is really important. Changing the views of society is really important. Breastfeeding in public not being an issue is very, very important. Certainly we have that issue in England that it's often frowned upon to feed in public. And of course, what could be more natural than feeding your baby? We don't want to be sent off to a bathroom to have to feed our babies. They deserve to be able to eat in public as well as we do. But remembering that we really need, as women, we need to have the physical support, knowing that people are going to help us after birth. They're going to help with the cooking and the cleaning and the things around the house that need doing so that we can focus simply on feeding our baby. That is our main job when baby arrives. The emotional and psychological support. It is hard, it is draining, it's tiring, and knowing that we have somebody there championing us along and saying, you're doing a fantastic job, keep going, you're getting it right, don't question yourself, it's okay, your body can do this, your body's miraculous, it's grown a baby, it can feed one too. That's really important. The professional support is also really important, and we have fabulous midwives and support workers and breastfeeding counsellors, lactation consultants, as well as online support. There'll be lots of websites and videos, and our friends that have breastfed babies as well. That is so important to know what the reality is. Nutritional support, making sure that you're eating and drinking enough, and taking care of your body, making sure that your body's healing well, watching for any signs of infection after you've had a baby. And of course, like Sheela said, actually mentioning COVID, what we have found is that mums are staying home, they're being part of this nuclear family, they're resting, they're looking after themselves. Breastfeeding rates are actually higher, babies aren't losing as much weight. So we must go back to basics and think about the fact that we need to rest, recuperate, and concentrate solely on looking after ourselves and our baby and starting that feeding journey, and not having outside distractions. I will stop there because otherwise I'll carry on forever. So thank you for letting me speak. And who's next?
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Latha Venkatraman. Dr. Latha is one of the few doctors in India who is specially qualified and trained in obstetric medicine. She has extensive experience in medical disorders in pregnancy, both in the United Kingdom and India. She has received MRCOG from UK and MRCP from Dublin. She has also been awarded the fellowship of FRCOG. Dr. Latha is one of the first in India to have combined clinics for medical disorders in pregnancy, like diabetes and pregnancy clinic, recurrent pregnancy loss clinic, etc. She has been recently awarded Indian Positive Award by CNN IBN for reaching out services. Her special interest, obstetric intensive care and emergency obstetric care. Her interest in the field of gynecology is vaginal surgeries. She has published many papers in international journals and has contributed to chapters in both undergraduate and postgraduate textbooks. She's also a trained Carnatic singer, a dramatist, and writes poems and plays. Here I present Dr. Latha Venkatraman. Over to you, Dr. Latha.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Very pleased to be one of the participants of this very interesting program. Can I share the slides, please? Would that be all right with you?
Yes, that will be all right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Can you all see the slides?
Yes, we can see that. Thank
you very much. Unique challenges in breastfeeding for Indian women. Well, they are unique challenges, and because of the myths that we have in India, it causes unique problems. Old customs are followed despite modernization and education of women. Mother and mother-in-law have a lot of influence on bringing up the babies, and of course influence the breastfeeding techniques and also the what can I say, the diet, clothing, etc., etc. Free unwanted advice is available in plenty in India, especially when the world has shrunk so much with media. Self-education, Google is the god. Many times they go wrong, and unfortunately lack of support because of nuclear families, and even online advice for breastfeeding is given by mother and mother-in-laws. So, and unfortunately we lack community midwives in our country, and UK is so very lucky to have so many community midwives who can support the breastfeeding mothers. Look good and feel good concept is quite common of late, especially in professional women, because they don't want their breasts to sag, and also they don't want to go through the stress or the mundane routine of breastfeeding, unfortunately. And that is so with professional women, in many women in India. What are the myths with the diet? Bland diet is prescribed in most of the parts of India, with some specified spices which can vary from part to part, and they feel that bland diet should be given, otherwise the baby can have a spicy taste of the breast milk, and the baby might not take the breast milk properly. Fruits and vegetables, there are lots of myths. Banana can cause cold in babies, etc., etc. high ghee is given as a part of postpartum diet, they feel that it will improve the fat content of the milk and makes the milk thick. Drinking water, they feel that it makes the milk quite watery, unfortunately. And so the postpartum women are not given enough water and also a balanced diet, which is very unfortunate. So the facts are, it's very important to have a balanced diet, and also 2 to 2.5 liters of water should be given to the postpartum women. Exercise, people have a myth that exercises reduce milk production. In fact, it improves the happy hormones and improves breastfeeding. And unfortunately, people have to be educated about it. Of course, avoid strenuous exercises. Clothing. Warm clothing is supposed to increase milk breast production. That is what people believe. But I feel warm clothing can dry them up, cause dehydration, especially when they are not given enough water to drink. And many Indian lactating women don't wear brassiers, and because the older generation feel that it can suppress milk production. So keeping oneself too warm increases dehydration, as I said, and reduces milk production. And not supporting the breast can cause nipple cracks, so nipples infection, and can hamper feeding. Myths about milk production. My milk might not be enough. Well, if the baby is wetting 5 to 6 nappies per day, it should be enough. And also gaining enough, if the baby is gaining enough weight, milk production is enough. Not having enough breast milk is familial. Oh, my mother did not have enough milk, and so I don't have. No, it is not really familial, and it is very individualistic. It can vary from baby to baby, pregnancy to pregnancy. I didn't have much milk with the last child. It is so again this time. As I said, it can vary from baby to baby. I'm too old to get breast milk. Even a 35-year-old can be talking like this. If one can get pregnant, believe me, they can breastfeed too, I'm sure. Storage of breast milk, lot of myths about storage of breast milk. Milk can be spoiled if not fed for a few hours. That's what many professional women, even professional women, think. By the time they go to the office and come back, they feel that the milk could have gone sour, which is very unfortunate. Can't store breast milk and can't be warmed. All these are myths, which are quite common. The facts are, it can be refrigerated or frozen, and breast milk can never go sour, especially when it is in the breast, and also, yeah, it is only on suckling it is expressed. Can be stored at room temperature for 4 to 6 hours and can be just warmed in a hot water bath. So, and also the other myth is breastfeeding position. It could be better in sitting position. Some people feel lying down is better and we need a comfy chair. Some people feel, especially sophisticated women from upper socioeconomic strata, and to be breastfeeding only for 10 minutes on each side is another myth people have. So the facts are, any position is fine as long as you encourage proper latching. Breastfeeding, actually the breast gets emptied in 10 to 15 minutes of suckling with a mature baby. So I think it is very important to realize that whatever is the comfortable position, that should be followed by the woman, that should be adopted by the woman, and the baby should be breastfed. Infection, well, I have infection, any infection in the body, even the great toenail infection, people think that they should not be feeding the baby. Cold, cough, fever, anything. I might infect the baby by feeding is the common myth that we find in lactating women. The facts are breastfeeding actually boosts the immunity of the baby, and it can even make it immune against the infection that the mother is having. So please take necessary precautions. And even with mastitis, you can still breastfeed. Of course, contraindications like HIV, etc., have open tuberculosis have to be taken into consideration. The breast anatomy is another thing that people are really, what can I say, they are conscious about. My breasts are small, I can't produce enough milk. No, milk production does not depend on the size of the breast at all. I have flat nipples, I can't feed. No, flat nipples, baby needs to latch on to the areola rather than, that is the black portion of the breast, rather than the nipples. So there are many myths like this, and the myths like I can't get pregnant because I'm breastfeeding. The contraceptive failure is quite high in lactating women because they don't use, the unwanted pregnancy is much more because they don't use contraception, thinking that if they are breastfeeding, they can't conceive. Mind you, ovulation can happen as early as day 21 after delivery, and 2 in 100 can conceive even if the baby is fully breastfed. Even if all the criteria are fulfilled, still they can conceive. Rest is another big myth. People feel that the nursing mothers need good rest at night and that will increase the milk production. Oh, not really, not at all. It is the stress which should be really kept down. It is not the sleep, it is the stress which affects the production of breast milk, but it reduces the milk producing hormones and thereby it reduces the milk. And once the milk reduces, there is additional stress on the mother. So this cycle perpetuates. So I think it's very important to make sure that the woman de-stresses herself. Social issues, Rebecca was talking about, feeding in public. It's such a social taboo in our country. Unfortunately, it's a big myth. Well, is it natural or is it indecent? One will have to sort of look at it, because so many professional women give up breastfeeding very soon because of the lack of availability of dedicated areas. So let alone the colostrum being, looking like a pus and it should not be fed, etc., etc. At least to some extent that myth has come down. If it is a post-cesarean section, they should be feeding the baby only after 48 hours, etc. That is also a myth which is coming down, fortunately, because obstetricians are encouraging breastfeeding within an hour or two of cesarean section. Okay, so I think there are lots and lots of myths which makes the breastfeeding quite a complicated affair. After all, it is very natural for a woman to feed the progeny. And if you really want to get the best, I think breastfeeding gives the best. With this, I would like to conclude and say thank you very much for the opportunity given. So I would like to take the questions a bit later if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Latha. We have our last speaker now, Dr. Supriya Chandrasekhar. Dr. Supriya is a consultant pediatric intensivist at Columbia Asia Hospitals. She is a gold medalist in Fellowship Pediatric Critical Care, MRC PCH from UK. She is a course director for National Fellowship Course. She has received Nirbhaya Award from Asari Trust on International Women's Day, has published in various index journals and national textbooks. She's the author of First Touch Newborn Booklet. Here I present Dr. Supriya Chandrasekhar.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start off by first congratulating my previous speakers. It kept me intrigued. Lovely presentations, all of you. Thank you so much. So let's come on to something a little more exciting. What's on my baby's plate? So now once we finish the first 6 months, we need to look at how to feed babies solid foods. As you can clearly see, I'm not the expert on this topic at all. I'm an ICU specialist, but what I realized with my children is that the most crucial years of health are dependent on the first 1,000 days in a baby's life. And that starts with the 9 months where the baby is within us and the first 2 years of life. So if we get breastfeeding and complementary feeding right, it goes a long way in their health. Next. So I'm no expert, I struggle, but we shall see. So the best age to start solid feeds, what is it? As you can see the little one, he's lifting up his neck, his head is quite steady. This is the perfect age where the head is nice and steady so they can actually digest the solid food. It's not that my friend told me 4 months is enough or the neighbor fed the baby at 5 months. The WHO clearly says the first 6 months should be exclusive breastfeeding. It is after completing 6 months that baby has a good neck and head control, is able to put objects into its mouth, the gums harden, the intestines are ready with amylase which can digest the solid feeds better. So yes, we will start after 6 months. What happens if we start too early? Well, we may think everything is going on well in terms of weight, but it could lead to indigestion, allergic reactions, a lot of immune processes in the gut gets changed, and that can lead to future allergies as well. Most importantly, the breastfeeding tends to come down much quicker than expected, and it could also result in breastfeeding failure. Let's not forget the risk of choking when you have a floppy head and you're trying to feed, especially in India. People have this horrible habit of making the baby sleep and pouring the ragi seri into the mouth. That is not correct. So what happens if we feed too late? Let's say in certain communities, they tend to breastfeed till about 8 to 9 months, and the introduction of solid feeds becomes quite late. Now that may lead to a lot of problems in terms of nutritional failure in both energy, protein, as well as micronutrients, which are extremely important for their immunity and overall well-being. So breast milk is perfect food up to 6 months, but beyond 6 months, we need to supplement it with many other things. Okay. So now what is good complementary food? Everyone wants to know what is that magic formula or what is that feed that I can give? As you can see, the parental expectation is on the first picture. I'm going to give my baby everything, what is rich in macro and micronutrients, clean, safe, locally available, easy to prepare. But that little baby has to eat that. And you know, that little one has to like it as well. And it should be palatable. It should be easy to prepare, which we locally can make as well. Much less in salt and sugar, and certainly preservative free. So let's look at how to make that. So the broad concept is when we are preparing a feed for a baby, the basic components are it should have energy or carbohydrate. So most baby feeds are cereal based. Now the cereals which are commonly used in India, especially in the south, is our wonderful ragi. It's the gold of Karnataka. We also use rice and wheat, etc. We also have protein sources which come from pulses, high energy foods such as ghee, oil, jaggery, fats, etc. We add that in very little amounts. And protective foods. Now this is missed most often. Protective foods are fruits and vegetables which have a lot of vitamins and minerals which need to be there. So just giving cereals is not enough. Most of the mothers who come to my OPD will say, yes, we are giving ragi seri or we are giving rice porridge, and that's about it. No introduction of fruits, etc. So let's start with how do we make these cereals right? So I'm a proponent of home-based cereals. We have lots of fresh ingredients available to us very easily in India. So I would suggest we use the millets which are available to us so easily, like ragi. The best way is to soak it overnight, allow it to sprout, dry it, and then toast it, or just fry it in a kadai. That will retain all the natural vitamins within it, And thereafter, we nicely powder it and sieve in a muslin cloth. Now, this powder is extremely nutritious. How do we make that? We make the consistency appropriate for the age. For example, previous slide, when we are putting the ragi, let's say for a baby who's just 6 months old, the porridge should be in a dripping consistency. So when we lift it up in a spoon, most of it should drip. And that is right for that baby. Whereas as we move along, let's say 11 to 12 months of age, when we take it up in our finger or the spoon, none of it should drip. It should be quite solid. So age appropriately, the consistency should be made. We could add milk for taste, like a bit of breast milk after it's prepared. No adding cow's milk till 1 year of age, and there is no discount on that. We could add some ghee, which is clarified from the cow's milk, but is acceptable even during infancy. Jaggery is rich in iron, and no sugar should be added till 1 year of age, no honey, but jaggery is a good sweet source. So what about the other essential foods? Apart from ragi sari, we need to make sure fruit purees, pulses, dals, vegetables, and sometimes even animal sources, if it's culturally appropriate, should be added. And they could be given as snacks. Next. So getting micronutrients is very important. Now we all focus on macronutrients, that is the big ones like giving the cereal, the ragi or the rice. But we forget it is these vitamins and minerals which play a very important role in the brain development, immunity and the general well-being. For that, we need to have all these various sources of vitamins which come from all the fruits and vegetables and certain animal sources as well. Let's remember the most common deficiency being iron. We need to be sure about iron-rich foods, which will be coming up in the further slides. Next. So remember, we need to rotate our vegetable groups. Many times parents say, my baby likes vegetables. What do you give? Carrot. Next visit, what do you give? Carrot. So it's not just one group. I know the baby likes it. Until the baby hates it, we should not give the same group. We need to rotate and what I call a rainbow plate. So it's good to have different colors, each of them having their own special nutrient. Next. So in India, 1 in 3 children, unfortunately, have iron deficiency. We did a study in our hospital as well, which showed that amongst hospitalized children, almost 80% of them have silent iron deficiency, and they have a lot of problems, not just in childhood, but also in their further IQ, in their immunity, etc. And certainly it brings down their appetite. So giving iron-rich food is very important. The first thing we need to remember is milk is white. It does not have any iron. So we need to supplement the colored foods, dark green leafy vegetables, red and orange ones, including some meats if it's allowed, or legumes like rajma, kabuli chana, dates, badam powder, etc. Next. So the question being packaged versus home-based. That's always something which we all face. It's so easy and it's so tempting when the packaged food tell us it has all these awesome nutrients in it, all put together. Whatever it is comes in a packet. So it has to have some preservatives and probably higher salt content. So nothing can beat what you can do at home. So of course, it's not that we can completely say every time we need to prepare a fresh meal. Most of us are working mothers and it's difficult, but as much as possible, we try to keep it fresh with simple ingredients that are available at home and what we use for cooking. Next. Next. Okay, so previous slide, please. So most mothers ask me, previous slide, most mothers ask me, what about snacks? So giving snacks to babies does not mean giving biscuits. The first thing mums always like to give is something that comes in a packet. Why should it be? A snack by definition is just a food that is given in between meals to fill nutrition gaps. So it's an amazing opportunity to give the nutrients which you could not give in your regular rice khichdi or ragi sari or wheat dalia, etc. So this is the time you can have those little cut fruits, make it look attractive, make smiley faces with it, and, boiled vegetables, milk pudding, paisams. We have so many lovely South Indian porridges and paisams that we can make, which is good for our babies. But not the sweets, chocolates, and biscuits. Unfortunately, when they are introduced very early, it's like giving your baby a little bit of brandy. They just get addicted to the high salt, high sugar, and high fat content. Next. Next slide. So, certain challenges and tricks while preparing. We need to remember that when we prepare, previous slide please. So, when we need to remember when we prepare our food, there are certain anti-nutritional factors. That means there are certain phytic acids which are present in the food, which is not very good for the baby. We need to remove that. And certain tricks in removing it. For example, when we use dal for the baby, we need to soak the dal as shown in the first picture, and the water becomes nice and cloudy. Throw that water away and then use the dal. That removes most of the agents which are anti-nutritional. Likewise, sprouting ragi or the other millets give them double the nutrients than using them plain. Toasting them or roasting them, again, is an important method to prevent these millets from swelling. Now, when they swell up while cooking, they get a lot of water, make the baby feel full faster, and that might affect the weight gain. Next slide. So how to get the best of an Indian meal? I would say choose whatever is suitable for you. Most often in the north, they use broken wheat or dalia. In the south, we use ragi or suji. And you can add some, you make the porridge. Don't forget to get the vegetables, all nice and colored ones. Add oil during the cooking. Using ghee is also important. Use fruit pulps as a taster in between, and keep snacks as nutrient dense. Try using dry fruit powder, boiled chickpeas, sweet potato, etc. Next. So we know the science of feeding. We try to aim for 3 to 4 meals in a day and 2 snacks. That's a lot of hard work. It's like the whole day we're only going to feed. But that's towards 1 year. And most often someone at home would help in the feeding process as well. But unfortunately, in nuclear family, that becomes quite a challenge. So we probably would leave the evening meal as a ready-made or an instant one, whereas the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, try to keep it where we prepare our meals and keep some portion for the baby as well. A 2-hour gap is important between snacks and at least a 4-hour gap between meals. I do know first-time mothers, and they just think their entire world is about feeding the baby. So from morning to night, it is about what next to give, what next to give. And then, you know, when we look back, that is completely impossible for the baby to take. So remember these rules, and each meal should have a bit of the cereal, pulses, and fruit. So it's having most of the element, not just the cereal. And remember to give nice, healthy snacks. Next slide. So how do we start the solid feeds? When we do start it, in the beginning, it's just 1 meal in a day. Start with few teaspoons, go nice and slow till about 7 days when you reach the full meal for that particular age, which your doctor will discuss with you. Remember to introduce new foods every 3 to 4 days. It's not that every day you want to overzealously change the food substances. That would make it difficult for the baby, and you wouldn't know what suits the babies. Be nice and patient. Babies really teach you patience, especially when the elders at home are saying, you can't even feed the baby. See what you prepared? The baby is not feeding. So you need to be, do your yoga breaths and say, it's fine. Baby is going to have it the next time. We don't have to worry about it. So be nice and patient. And it's okay if the baby has some loose stools or hard stools. That is all part of the process. So certain tips to make the food energy dense. Most of the parents coming to our OPD ask me, how do I make my baby fat? That is something which all Indian mums want to do. They want to make their babies really fat. And by the time they are 18 years and above, everyone should magically become thin. So I don't think we should overfeed our babies, but we should keep them well nourished. There is a big difference between the two. So if we want to increase the calories, let's say during illness, when they have lost weight, etc., or the baby is not gaining weight well, we could use milk instead of water when preparing a cereal. We could use energy fortifiers like ghee, groundnut powder, jaggery, dry fruit powder. After 1 year, we could use honey. We can make the consistency a little more thicker using oat milk, flour, etc. can be an added calorie. Custards and paisams and dry fruit powder, as we said before, is also important. So let's bust the myths. Food does not cause illnesses to little babies. So giving them banana and oranges does not cause colds and coughs. And definitely curds is good. They say up to 2 years, we won't give curds because Kimbarate, the child is going to have a lot of cough. No. Throughout the world, people give yogurt. We also have lovely climate to make fresh curds at home full of good probiotics, which helps in digestion, keeps our gut immunity good. Hence, we need to give them, apart from milk, curds as well. Rice and ragi can be given even during illnesses. Again, we need to respect how the baby wants to feed and whether the baby really wants to or not. Please continue breastfeeding throughout this process, and how much ever the baby wants can have. Ready mix baby foods are not superior to homemade foods, so you can mix and match between the two. And milk certainly is not a substitute for food. So I've seen many mothers just saying, baby didn't have anything, so we just gave them a bottle feed. No, that is not acceptable. As we said, milk is a wholesome, complete food up to 6 months. After that, they need to be complemented. So art of feeding, the first thing I would like to say is, I think we should not do YouTube feeding. Now, most mothers come and tell me only when the TV is on or the screen time is there, they're able to feed the baby. Otherwise, it does not happen. Now, this is a wrong habit that we start right from the beginning. Instead, talking to the baby, interacting would be much more beneficial in the long run. One-to-one parent interaction in the younger days, making the meals as colorful, having a rainbow plate, preventing juices and drinks 2 hours pre and post meal is important. Using finger foods, let babies make a mess. That is part of their development. And as they become older, they need to eat along with us. So merging family meal times with baby meal time is very important. Next slide. So in summary, solid foods are best started after 6 completed months. We need to fill their nutrition gaps for energy, protein, and micronutrients. Home-based cereals are great. Use rice, ragi, etc. Sprouted and toasted millets are very useful. Don't forget to add the fruits and veggies in different forms. Have a rainbow plate. And most important, please learn to enjoy the process of feeding and let the baby enjoy it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Supriya. That was a wonderful session by all the doctors. Thank you all so much. We would now invite any questions from the participants. I don't see any questions on the chat box. If anyone would like to ask, please write it on the chat box, or you can raise your hands if you have the video on. Supriya, do you have anything to conclude?
Yeah, the floor is open to questions. And if anyone have, please raise your hands.
Yeah,
there are 2 participants. Yeah.
If Jayesh can unmute them, Jayesh.
How do we know how much to feed? Yeah, you can take it.
The question is from Ms. Swati on how do we know how much to feed? I would just like to answer that question. So in the early days when we are breastfeeding, one, the mother has certain cues on how much feed she is giving the baby. So she feels her breast is becoming lighter after the baby takes a feed. Most importantly, the baby passes a urine after every feed, which again tells us baby is full. Certainly, weight gain is one of the factors we use. In the early days, in the first few months, babies actually pass urine about 8 to 10 times in a day, which tells us that the feeds are more than enough. Older babies, when it comes to above 6 months, when we've started solid foods, it's going by their little cues on them wanting, opening their mouth, looking out for something, feeling full in terms of being less cranky, sleeping well, etc. So I think you will learn those biological reflexes as you feed the baby, and certainly weight every month when we go to our pediatrician and get it checked. If they are on their centiles, they are perfectly fine.
Okay, Latha Madhavan has a question. Till what age we should avoid salt?
Okay, so throughout the world, if we see the literature, added salt is not allowed till 1 year of age. Beyond 1 year, we add small amounts. However, in certain foods, like in basic Indian foods which we make, the natural salt content in these foods is very, very low. So adding an extremely small amount in them should be okay. But certainly no adding salt to ragi cereal or to curds, etc., to make it more palatable.
Okay, so maybe Rebecca should answer the previous question. So how do I know my baby has had enough? Rebecca?
Yeah, hi. From the very beginning of breastfeeding, the most important thing to do, we used to call it demand feeding, and now we call it responsive feeding. So if a baby is fit and healthy, they should be able to lead their own feeding. So they should be able to feed as often as they want, for as long as they want. That, in theory, should mean that the baby is getting enough. But of course, we look for the things that you just mentioned, the wet and dirty nappies. Babies actually having the appearance of being very satisfied when they come off the breast, and sleeping and having a gap between feeds, and then eventually, putting on weight once they get through that first period of slight weight loss. We need to be careful with that, because we can make the assumption that babies are satisfied, and sometimes they're actually just quite sleepy and tired out by the process of breastfeeding. So we need to look at all of the whole clinical picture. It obviously depends if babies are, particularly big, particularly small, if they're premature or not. So we look at the other risk factors around that as well. But ultimately, if a baby is gaining weight and they are satisfied between feeds, they have perhaps a couple of hours of sleep between, and they have got full nappies, that's a very reassuring sign that they are feeding enough. Also, the breasts will feel quite different. So if your breasts feel full before a feed and then after a feed they feel emptier, you can be quite sure that there is something there that's going into the baby as well. You need to look at how often the baby is feeding. We would certainly expect a baby to be feeding at least 8 times a day, and that includes feeds at night as well. So there are lots of things that we look for. It's not just one particular thing. And of course, we have to have faith, because we don't know how much the baby is taking. We don't know in milliliters like you can see with a bottle. We need to look at other things as well.
Yeah, so Rupa is asking, my baby looking towards the plate, does it mean she's ready?
Okay, so we need to look at all the cues. I'm presuming your baby is very young, and just looking at the plate of food, they wouldn't understand that at that stage. As we explained, their head should be steady. They should have hand-mouth coordination, where the baby is able to put their hand frequently into the mouth. At least complete about 5 months of age. We always want them to complete 6 months of age before we start solid foods. Yeah, I think that should answer your question.
Yeah, so I think that also answers Y's question, that is it fine to start solid from third or fourth month? So you are telling wait till 6 months.
Yes, however, in certain specific situations prescribed by the doctor, where probably the baby has reflux or certain conditions, the doctor discusses with the parents, and then we start solid feeds a little earlier, but never before 4 completed months.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Supriya and Rebecca. And Vivek has a question. So how do we deal with overactive letdowns? Yeah, Hallin may be having some inputs in this.
I mean, I have read, I haven't needed to use it myself, but that sometimes it can be helpful to pump, even hand express, if you don't have a pump, before you start feeding the baby, in order to reduce how strong the letdown is, if that is a particular issue. And then you can save that milk for later as well.
Yeah.
Just in you need to balance in terms of the letdown and the supply. So it's good to sort of determine which one is the problem, whether it's an oversupply issue or whether it's perhaps the force of the letdown reflex. So if it's the force of the letdown reflex, it can be that you change position so that gravity is helping you. So perhaps positions where you're lying back more, so that the milk you're not in effect helping the gravity as well. There are certain foods as well, consuming things like peppermint tea, which will help to decrease the milk supply. But that's if the milk supply, whether it's the amount of milk versus the letdown, that is actually the problem. And pumping at the beginning can, with an oversupply, you don't want to be pumping and stimulating the breast, which will then increase the supply and cause an issue with the calibration between mum and baby. And to an extent, often it's just something that babies need to get used to with time, and they do get used to it with time. But because there's a massive difference between how they suck with colostrum to how they suck with breast milk, and how they have to coordinate their sucking and swallowing, it's just something that they get used to with time as they mature.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca and Hallin. There is Ravi Hijrat is asking, I am a new mom currently doing combination feeding, breast and formula. How can I work towards solely breastfeeding, as currently my supply is not sufficient? Yeah, Rebecca, maybe you can take that question.
Yeah, that's fine. To start with, it's difficult. It is difficult. And ultimately, you sort of need to prepare yourself for a little bit of a rough time ahead as you decrease the formula and try to increase your supply, which you just have to do. Ultimately, it is difficult. More skin-to-skin contact, more expressing. Hand expressing is best in terms of stimulating the hormones, thinking about diet and nutrition, potentially thinking about medication, but certainly thinking about supplements. But having as much time with the baby on the breast as possible. So just decreasing the formula. And if you're formula feeding via a bottle, there might be, because it's very easy for babies to drink from a bottle, it's almost like dripping into their mouth. So they don't actually have to make much effort, whereas with breastfeeding they do. And it's why it's very, very good for all the facial muscles and the development of the ear, the inner ear. Because if you make bottle feeding a little bit more complicated, a little bit harder for them, potentially by finger feeding, which if you Google finger feeding or cup feeding, it takes a little bit more effort for them to do. So they might be slightly more inclined to latch onto the breast. Certainly doing things like taking a bath with your baby and feeding in the bath. Using a lot of stimulus to sort of increase your hormonal response by emotional means, looking at pictures of the baby, smelling things whilst you're expressing, or holding the baby whilst you're expressing, perhaps expressing from one side whilst feeding the baby on the other, which I know is a bit of a handful, but can help to increase the supply. It is a long process, and one that you have to be committed to. And Aggie, of course, knows this very, very well. And we've discussed it at length. So she's quite an expert in it on, from a personal point of view.
Yeah, there is a different question here. I have a 20-month-old baby and I'm breastfeeding my son rigorously. How to stop breastfeeding smoothly is the question. I don't know who wants to take that.
I'm not really at that stage yet, so I think Rebecca would be better at answering that one.
Mine have all self-weaned really, and so you do get to that point. If you make the choice as a woman that you want to wean your baby, you can do various things. You can go cold turkey completely and just cut it out. And there will be an emotional tie. There will be a period of transition, so it is tricky. You can try all sorts of things like distraction techniques, depending on when the child is feeding. So if it's always a bedtime thing, perhaps somebody else puts the baby to bed for a while, but balancing that with the baby not feeling sort of suddenly abandoned, but discussing it as well. Although a 20-month cannot understand fully what's going on, being open and just discussing what's happening is really, really important, and replacing it with some other form of comfort, because probably by that stage, they're not so much using it for nutrition, although it has a nutritional value at that stage. It's important to make sure that the baby still has some comfort and sense of warmth and bonding with the mother.
Okay, great. So the other question is, when and how do we introduce nuts? Shannon is asking.
Okay, I'm sure my colleagues in the UK would agree that in the UK and abroad, strictly they don't use nuts in baby feeds, probably even up to 3 years of age. However, the incidence of nut allergy and intolerance to nuts in India is far less. So there is no recommendation in the Indian literature to not use nuts less than 1 year. Again, we look at family history, whether there is anyone else having nut allergy, etc. And in those situations, most parents will themselves know that we should avoid, or in those children who have what we call high atopy or high risk of allergies, we tend to keep them off nuts, cow's milk, etc. Otherwise, in general, we use badam powder or almond powder in the baby foods as well. So if you want to be very safe, it's after 1 year. Once you introduce, you need to observe the baby for any rashes, vomiting, tummy upset, etc. And swelling of the lips, which is again very, very rare. Otherwise, we can introduce it anytime with our baby foods as well.
Okay, going on that only, how much water to give?
I think I answered that question while typing to save time.
We do tend to introduce nuts in a sense in the UK quite early on. Actually, we do encourage the introduction of things like peanut butter quite early because of our incidence of nut allergies. So we try to combat that by introducing it earlier, and certainly not limiting it during pregnancy, not limiting intake for the mother.
That's interesting, Rebecca, because initially we were not doing that. So that's very interesting that, so the babies are fed nuts as well?
So obviously in different forms, obviously not being fed solid nuts until, yes, a later stage, but fed other types of nut butters as early as possible, because what seems to be showing through is the more we avoid these products, of course, the more we create more allergies. So as soon, and certainly if there is a history of food allergies in the family, to actually introduce those foods as early as possible, and to certainly consume them during the pregnancy to get the baby familiar with them and hopefully avoid the allergies.
Excellent. So that makes it very easy for us, because in India we use a lot of nuts, either groundnut or almonds, etc., in our cereals.
Okay, so there's Vivek asking about what should I do if my baby coughs or chokes when breastfeeding? Yeah, Rebecca, maybe you can take that, or Hallin can take that.
Yep.
Okay.
Most of the time,
I probably should help out here. First of all, choking and coughing are big words, especially for little babies when they breastfeed. So we need to first look at, is this pathological or something we need to worry about? Is this something which is happening with every feed? Then it is a concern. I certainly would recommend a consultation with the pediatrician to actually look at what is happening, because there are certain conditions in the upper tract which can cause choking and coughing. And anything to do with the passage of air, we are on high alert. However, if it's something which has happened as a one-off, baby's always been feeding well, but just once the baby's had a cough, it's probably to do with very fast letdown and baby being hungry and grabbing for a feed, where I think we just have to go slow, take the baby off the breast, keep up on the shoulder, pat him down, calm him, and again put it. Sometimes we may even express the milk a bit and then offer the breast to the baby.
Okay, we don't have any new questions now. So Suma Ravi, over to you.
Hi, this is Satish. I do have a question here. First of all, good evening. Yeah, good evening to everyone, and good afternoon to the ones in UK. My question is since I have a 2-month-old baby, it's mainly to the throwing up or just kind of vomiting when she's fed with the milk. And the main reason might be is because of digestion not happening properly, or is it an overfed or something? And she's always like she wants to be on the mother's lap, and whenever she's made to lie on the bed, she cries a lot. So this question has been asked by my wife to take it over. So what would be the main reason for the baby? And she is very active when she's let her to sleep on the bed. She actively moves around, checks whether the mother is nearby. And she cries a lot so that she takes.
Okay, did the faculty get the question?
Yes.
Yeah, can you please answer briefly?
Yeah. So thanks, Satish, for your question. Although it would be best to discuss this in a consultation, I just would like to give you an idea why babies may do that. Now, there is something called as physiological reflux that happens in 60 to 70% of normal babies. Now, what that means is, whenever baby takes milk, the milk goes down to the food pipe and into the tummy or the stomach. And from there onwards, it should pass down to the intestines. But in some babies, a small amount of it comes right back up to the food pipe, and it irritates them with a little bit of acid. So they don't feel very comfortable when they are kept flat, because more amount of milk comes up. And when they are picked up or, carried and walked about, they feel much more comfortable. So this reflux problem, the good news is it gets better with age. As the baby develops good control, tummy strength, etc., the reflux comes down, and once we start solid feeds, etc., it almost disappears. So one of the reasons why babies get uncomfortable when they are completely flat is reflux. And simple things like keeping the baby on a 30 to 40 degree elevation, and we'll discuss a few other options on a one-to-one consultation. But it's not uncommon to find that, and I'm sure your baby will do well. So you first need to tell your wife that things are going to get better.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, Suma ma'am, maybe you can take over.
Yeah. Gratitude is not only the great virtue. Sorry? Yeah.
Please continue, ma'am.
Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. On behalf of President Rathna Supriya and members of Innovil Club of Bangalore, it's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. We profusely thank all the speakers for taking time off from the Dr. Sheela Swamy, Dr. Hallin, Ms. Rebecca Balcombe, Dr. Latha Venkatraman, and Dr. Supriya Chandrasekhar. Heartfelt to treat the needy patients who come through in a wheel. Thank you very much, Doctor, for that gesture. Thanks to our District Chairman, Suma Prafula, Association Council Member, Latha Venkatraman, District Executive Committee members, and presidents and members from other clubs for participating today. Thank you.